Hello. I've dressed up for you on this one. Let's talk about bride prep. Now, if you're a bride or a photographer watching this, welcome. If you're not one of those two things, then that's kind of awkward now, isn't it? Unless you're just someone who just wants to watch my face or just learn about, what bride prep photography, kind of consists of, then this video is for you. Without further ado, let's go through my top 10 tips for photographing bride prep and having a seamless bride prep experience. Tip number 1, planning is key. So I suppose this point relates back to both photographers as well as brides watching this video. Now, if you're a bride, I think it's really important to have the day really planned in advance. So what this basically means is trying to understand things, for instance, like travel time between your bride location for prep and your ceremony. Or it could be how many people you have at your bridal house whilst doing bride prep, because sometimes you have extra people needed than need be. If you're a photographer watching this, then I think it's really important to understand how much time you actually have for bride prep. I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure you get your key shots as well as family shots during bride prep, all while making sure that you're within the time constraints that you already have. As a photographer walking into bride prep, it's really key to understand a few things. Your bridal party, for instance, does the bride have any bridesmaids? Some brides don't even have bridesmaids, especially for South Asian weddings. It's not really a common thing, but only recent times have shown that they actually have. Why planning is so important is because you've gone through months and months and months of preparation for the actual wedding day. The morning can actually be the most horrible part if it's not planned accordingly well. And you want to make sure that whoever your photographer or videographers are, or any other vendors involved in the day, you're having a really seamless experience. There have been numerous times where I've captured bride prep and things have just been manic, to say the least, and unfortunately it impacts my quality or my ability to work within a really efficient and practical manner. So for any bride watching this, please take notes for the remainder of the following tips to ensure that you have a really great positive bride prep experience. Tip number 2, consider your location. It's actually pretty interesting. If your ceremony and where your bride prep location generally is are perhaps two different areas and there could be a lot of travel time, I'm just saying it could be pretty cool to have, say, like an Airbnb booked, close by, or maybe even stay at a hotel the night before. One of the benefits of having a really practical location close towards your ceremony, if it's not at the ceremony location itself, is that you don't have to stress about things such as travel time. What that does is it just gives your photographer and videographer more time to work with you, as well as your makeup artist, to ensure that you're getting ready in the most time-effective manner as possible, whilst also keeping in mind for the fact that you have to be somewhere else by a certain particular time. Now, if you're in Sydney watching this, then you'll know that Sydney traffic is actually really horrible. Like, it's really bad. There's been times where my bride's been running late or my groom's been running late just because of the fact that they're stuck in traffic. Again, going back to tip number 1, planning is key. People always say, oh yeah, it takes half an hour to get from point A to B, from location to location. However, they don't sometimes consider in traffic. And if you live in Sydney, then it's pretty bad half the time. So my biggest tip is also just be mindful of the fact that the distance between may not necessarily be an accurate representation, depending on whatever time of the day you're looking at it via your Google Maps. Sometimes it could be an extra half an hour, depending on traffic. Sometimes it could be even quicker on a very odd case. Tip number 3, organize your bridal room. Now, this goes for both photographers as well as brides getting married. I suppose it becomes a responsibility of either one of the two to make sure that the operating space that you are going to be taking photos in is relatively clean. What I also mean by that, in addition, is making sure that all of your stuff is concisely laid out. We're talking about things such as obviously your bridal outfit, keeping in mind if you're not already wearing it before your photographer and videographer get there. Number 2, you've got obviously your jewelry, so having, say, like a flat lay or having things laid out concisely really well, or any other key details of the day that you think are really important to capture. Make sure that those things, those items, those accessories are all laid out, nicely or really close by. At least that way, when a photographer or a videographer walks in, they'll be able to identify that, okay, something's really important, I need to focus on that. Tip number 4. That's good tea. Make sure you get ready near as much window light as possible, but I will always opt out for the biggest room with the best natural window light. Honestly, even if it's a smaller room, I don't really care. As soon as I get to bride prep, my first thing is to turn off all artificial light, all fluorescent light, anything that doesn't make or reflect, I suppose, natural skin tone. Now, I understand makeup artists like to use ring lights and that, perhaps it's easier for them to do their jobs. That's fine, that aside is absolutely okay. But when it comes to taking bridal portraits, I always try and position my subject closest towards the biggest source of natural window light. So whatever room you're deciding on the day to keep as your bridal room, where you're going to be getting ready, make sure that there is ample amounts of natural window light. For those few particular brides who like to do something silly and get ready at like 3-4 a.m. in the morning, that's a different story. Again, you might not have natural window light at that time, and given the nature of the day, you just have to have an early start. That's fine. In that case, it's up to the photographer or videographer to make sure that they have artificial light or that they can replicate any form of light to make sure that they still get those key shots when you're getting ready. Tip number 5, know your makeup artist. That's a really good tip. I suppose this perhaps goes more towards photographers and videographers, but it's really important to just know who your makeup artist is on the day. A couple of reasons as to why I say that is because number one, you perhaps can build a relationship around that makeup artist to understand how they like to work, what time they're going to need, how long until they get their base, done, and that way you can at least figure out, okay, well, when the bride is being occupied by the makeup artist, I'm going to now take photos of, say, details. And the benefit of that is that now you're working confluently with each other to understand that, hey, you know what, I'm going to give you your time. So then when I come to my time, we can just exchange the bride and understand that, okay, great, I can work with you as opposed to against you. It just makes the entire experience really, really easy for the bride, as well as for the makeup artist as well. He's got a job to do. Therefore, it's really important that, the photographer or videographer don't interrupt that flow whilst it's happening. Just try and ask the bride in advance before the wedding day, hey, who your makeup artist? Maybe as a photographer, reach out to them, just let them know that, hey, I'll be working on the main wedding day with you for the bride and I can't wait to see you. And it basically just sets a really great tone. Tip number 6, always try and push for an hour minimum for bride prep shots. Now again, perhaps more for photographers than for brides, but also really if you're a bride, I think you'd want a lot of bride prep shots anyway. So let's just say for argument's sake, this is for both of you guys. The good thing is that with bride prep, you can get it done within half an hour. However, for a really great time to make sure that you're getting all the key moments, it's really important to make sure you have adequate amount of timing, and also keeping in mind from the driving time, the location at hand, and how long it takes to generally get ready. These things are going to impact how much time your photographer has with you. I always stress to my brides to make sure I have at least an hour with you. I can easily take up to 2, sometimes even 3 if I'm really, really particular. But the truth is, because there's so much happening on the day, it rarely ever happens. So when you're planning in terms of, hey, Mr. Photographer or Miss Photographer, I basically have my bride prep starting at this time. How about you come in this time because I know it's going to take you an hour roughly to get all the shots that you need. Maybe just being considerate of the fact that, hey, you know what? I know at the end of the day, I'm going to appreciate a lot more of the photographer's time if I have, all these key shots that I really, really want. So therefore, let's just try and give them as much time as they could possibly need, even if it surpasses past the actual hour itself. Now, understandably, things aren't always great when it comes to bride prep times because you've got a lot on for the day. So always try your best as a bride to squeeze in as much time the photographer can take in terms of getting your bridal shots, because trust me, you will appreciate it as a bride. Now, in an ideal world, that would be great, but bride prep is stressful, so sometimes you may not get that much time, but try and get it if you can. Tip number 7, arrive early. Now, as a photographer, the arriving early part isn't necessarily to start taking photos earlier. Actually, it's just to get prep started and get your details organized and figure out who you're photographing, where you're photographing them, in what room, in what lighting conditions, and by what time you exactly need to leave and finish that by. Again, this could probably relate back to step 1 in terms of planning. Arriving early just helps to make sure that that entire motion is really, really fluid, that when you get to the bride prep experience, to the location that you're going to be capturing some of the most amazing shots, you're going to be there early enough to not only set up and not waste time, strapping up and getting your memory cards formatted and having batteries and all that, which, mind you should be doing the night before, but at least when you get there early enough, you know exactly what you need to do, where you need to be, who you need to talk to, and exactly how you're going to do these things. For brides, again, when it comes to arriving early, I suppose it's more of a photographer thing, but you can incorporate it for you in terms of bringing your makeup artist in a little bit earlier as well, or just pushing back your timeline even just a little bit forward, just so that you've got ample time. Whatever time you think is in your mind, as far as bride prep goes, just add an extra bit of time on there, because trust me, you will need it, your vendors will also need it, and perhaps your guests running late might also need it. You're just going to appreciate at the end of the day that you have so much more time, because things always run delayed, especially if you're a South Asian wedding photographer or you're capturing large scale weddings. Tip number 9. It's always okay to reenact. The shot with the earring stuff, and they do one of these ones, and then sometimes the earring falls off, and then you look really awkward trying to pick it up. Yeah, well, that shot is never really normally nailed within the first 5 minutes. It always takes time. Or even the shot when, the makeup artist goes and puts the blush. Yeah, and you're trying to capture that moment, but then sometimes the bride's just because they're twitching around with with their eyes or some stuff. I don't know, maybe the brush itself is just not angled particularly in the hand. As you can tell here, things take a bit of time to perfect, right? What I'm trying to say is that when it comes to bride prep, it's okay to try and do the same thing 3 or 4 times just to get the key shot. Again, you want to situate your bride to do exactly what you want them to do, even if it's with the makeup artist to get those getting ready shots. You want to reenact in telling them what they actually need to do. Then when they're doing it, try and capture that. Now again, if it takes a couple of times, that's okay. So as long as you're not spending an hour just reenacting the same thing. It's also like reenacting shots when, like, say, you know, someone's like just talking. You know how often you get a bride who's just talking, and that's fine, they should be talking, it's their wedding day, they must be excited. But those moments when they talk, it takes away the smile, and when you don't have a smile, it just becomes awkward. So I've gotten really weird images where brides are like, I'm not saying that's how they always are. You get the point where they're just talking, right? And tip number 10, the most important tip, like so important. Let me just drink some tea, that's how important it is. Green tea is so good for you. As a bride, you know what? Drink green tea. As a photographer, oh, I just like green tea. Tip number 10, it's always about storytelling. Now, I cannot emphasize this enough. The entire part of bride and groom prep is to document the journey for the bride or the groom on their special day leading up to the actual wedding ceremony. A lot is happening, right? You've got the bride itself getting ready. You've got the mother who's perhaps walking down the stairs, turns the corner and sees the bride for the first time as she's fully dressed. You've got bridesmaids who are in awe of the fact that their bride looks absolutely phenomenally stunning. All of these moments I talk about in previous videos for 1 second, but I'll go into a little bit more depth now when I say it as it's the 1% moments that count. These are the 1% moments, right? Your wedding day comprises itself of a lot of 1% moments that make up the full 100%. I talk about it a lot, and I think it's really important to explain how detrimental it is to get these 1% moments, right? It could be the difference between a reaction. It could be someone turning the corner and see someone for the first time, for instance, having a first look. It could be when you look at your partner and you realize that 5 seconds after you just kissed, you guys are officially married. Or it could be during your couple first dance. All of these things are really important, but when it comes to bride prep in particular, it's about storytelling. So for photographers more than for brides watching this, I think it goes beyond just pressing a button. If you're doing just that, you're not doing a good job. There's always something to convey as far as a story goes. When the mother's getting the bride ready, or when the bride's, you know, putting her earrings on, or when she's doing something so casual like adjusting her dress. Like something as simple as that can look so beautiful. There's no need to overcomplicate it. So whenever you're looking at bride prep or groom prep, right, make sure you're documenting the entire process, whereby if someone were to look at it, they can see the fashion in which the bride got ready. They can see the steps that happened on the day. They could see the funny moments, the emotional moments. They can see the 1% that the bride was experiencing on her wedding day. And if you're a bride watching this, needless to say, you don't have to have this conversation with your photographer. They should already know that. But just tell them that, hey, by the way, like, you know, as my wedding photographer, I think it's really important if you could focus on those details. And again, these are things that you perhaps shouldn't really need to explain. It just exists. And up until people don't realize how important they are, they're never going to fully appreciate them. So that's why I always talk about the 1% moments and storytelling. That's it, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video about bride prep and how to have a seamless experience. I tried to make it as relatable to both the photographer as well as the bride watching this. If you guys know someone who's getting married or you're getting married, then great. If not, then send this video to someone who perhaps might appreciate it. As a photographer, I hope some part of these tips actually helped. And if you like this video, please show it some love by liking, commenting, and subscribing down below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Cheers.